Have you ever wondered how would the Steam Deck compare to the newly released Asus Rog Ally performance-wise if they both were running Windows? Hi, Handheld Sauce here, and if so, then this video is exactly for you. And even if you have a SteamOS Steam Deck, I still think this video should apply to you guys as well, since the performance should be near identical. Okay, so to begin with, let's set the ROG Ally's resolution to 720p to get as close to as possible to the Steam Deck's 800p resolution. And the TDP is set to 15 watt performance mode, as you can see here. And on the Steam Deck it should be set to 15 watts as well, even though the Ally's performance mode I believe can boost a little bit higher than 15 watts. And after the initial tests, we'll let the Ally fly. With turbo mode plus charging cable, that should give us more than 25 watts of how the Ally actually runs. Okay, so for starters, I wanted to try out some games that have built-in benchmarks to get an apples to apples comparison. So first, I want to test out the gaming's behemoth, Cyberpunk 77, the resource hogger game. Yeah, so let's jump right into it. Let's quickly check settings. Okay, so the settings you can see are left on default. And let's run the benchmark. For some reason it thinks my control is a PS4 control, but that's fine. I think it's this button, right? You want to reset? No, that's not the button. Okay, it's this one, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's just let the benchmark run and see the magic happens. The FPS you can see at the top right corner. By the way, if you have a SteamOS Steam Deck, you can run this test and check is performance actually comparable between Windows and SteamOS. That would be interesting to know, so if you do, let me know down in the comments. Also, I forgot to mention both handhelds have their sounds set to 50%, so this should be an accurate representation. Okay, so it looks like we're hovering above 30 FPS, 31, I saw some dips. But I think this part is pretty tough, yeah. Now it's in the 40s, 42, 44. Outside, 39, there was one stutter. But so far looking great. Even the reflections, I would say, on this screen look good. Okay, so here are the stats. 32.46. Minimum was 8.96, max was 56. Okay, interesting. And here you can see all the settings. Maybe by accident I messed up something, but yeah. Now let's jump to the ROG Ally side and compare those performances. Okay, so we're back on the ROG Ally now. Please keep in mind, let's see the sound volume on this guy. We're sitting at 28 only. This is 28. Steam Deck was at 50. If I put it on 50, it's just way too loud. You can probably hear this. So we're set it down to like 30. You couldn't see that properly, yeah, but we set it to 30. And now let's go into settings. Okay, so the quality Steam Deck, I believe these are the same settings. We are on 720p performance mode, 15 watt. Oh yeah, I need to enable real-time monitor. If it works. There we go, it works, and let's just run the benchmark. So I think this is kinda comparable to the Steam Deck's performance. Maybe a little bit better, right? Right, guys? Steam Deck was hovering up. Wait, actually it's 25 now, so maybe it is kind of. It's like 22 now. What's going on? Well, those are some interesting test results. Okay guys, so actually I had to rewind the tapes and double check, but our average FPS on 15 watts is lower than the Steam Deck by 1 FPS. We had higher highs but lower lows. That's kinda crazy if you ask me. Now let's do the same thing just by putting it on performance mode and plugging this bad boy in. Okay guys, so we are plugged in at turbo 25 watt mod, 720p resolution. Let's run the benchmark and see how it performs. Maybe this time we'll get better performance than the Steam Deck. I'm still really shocked about the 15 watt performance on this device. Okay, so far it looks like it's doing better, like 44, 45 FPS inside the building, but we are running at like 34 watts. But that's impressive on a handheld. Oh, there was a stutter. And we're above 60 outdoors. So turbo mode definitely helps in this situation. And the results are in, and they are definitely better. 47 FPS with a 95 maximum and a 14 minimum. Okay guys, so I did something pretty quirky. I turned on 1080p. We are on 1080p, Steam Deck settings, and let's try running the benchmark and see if the Ally actually cooks itself. Or does it survive? Let's see. 30 FPS indoors, that's kinda impressive. Okay, and so the results are in. We got 34 FPS, 12 minimum, 55 maximum. That's actually really impressive, I would say. It's actually really impressive. It's a little bit better than the Steam Decks on 720p. Of course, you have to like be plugged in and consume a lot more energy, but I would say that's pretty playable, right guys? On 1080p. Damn. Next up is a bit older title, but I still think it looks really good. Nonetheless, is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Let's try it out on the Steam Deck first. Here are the settings. I put everything on high, and display is 800p, TAA anti-aliasing, and everything else pretty much off. Okay, so let's start the benchmark. Okay, so it's around 40 FPS, fluctuating a little bit, but that's pretty impressive. While this outdoor area seems to be doing pretty well, it was up to the 80s and now it's 60. And we're back to the 40s, but I would say this is really playable. Keep in mind, this is on high. Okay, and the results are in. Let's check them out. Average FPS is at 40. And all the other mumbo jumbo, minimum is 14, max 85. Looks pretty good. Now let's jump to the Ally side. Okay, so now we're on the Ally side. Let's quickly check the settings. The resolution is 720p, and graphics are set to high. And let's run the benchmark. That was an interesting pop-in effect, but overall I would say it's running great. But I think we were getting more FPS on the Steam Deck in this area. At least in the beginning. I think it shot up to 80. Okay, and the results are in. Let's just move this out of the way for now. Average FPS is 48 with 7,400 frames rendered. And our minimals around the same. Huh, interesting. I was expecting a little bit better performance out of this. But now let's run the same benchmark, just put the Ally in turbo mode. 720p turbo mode. And see what happens. Run the benchmark. And here are the results for turbo mode. We got an average of 58 FPS and 9,000 frames in total. So the final test I want to do now, as we did with Cyberpunk, let's switch to 1080p. Okay, so as you can see, we're now at 1080p. Highest settings? No, let's do high settings, there we go. And run the benchmark. And the results are in. Let's quickly check him out. And the ROG Ally is really loud. I'm gonna actually turn it down a bit. So let's see. The average FPS is 39 with frames rendered 6K. So I think that's similar to the Steam Deck's performance on 720p, no? Something like that. Yeah, so keep in mind, this was in turbo. So let's move on to the next game. Now in the free handling category, I also recorded a few more games. These were older recordings before my ROG Ally's SD card reader borked itself. So the video might be a little bit looking different, but don't mind that. Let's just see at the stats. I'm sorry for the quality, but since my Ally is like out of commission currently, so we have to deal with this. So I tested Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Both games run great on Steam Deck and the ROG Ally. On the Steam Deck I had no issue with Genshin Impact, only in like larger open areas and bigger massive spaces in combat. The FPS hovers around like 45 to 40 FPS in the newest region, but everywhere else it's like 60 FPS. Meanwhile in Honkai Star Rail, it's a similar story, but during battles I believe like maybe the settings, since it's a newer game than Genshin Impact, maybe the settings and effects are like more advanced, but during gameplay it like hovers around 45 to 60 FPS depending on like what cutscenes or moves are going. So that was on the Steam Deck, and on the Ally it's like pretty much the same. On like 720p on the Ally it's smooth sailing 60, and on 1080p it hovers like from some areas, bigger areas like 25 FPS to like 30, and like other areas are like 60. Like the Ally combat in Honkai Star Rail feels the same as on the Steam Deck, except it's like 1080p. Maybe a few frames less or more, I couldn't tell, but like in more open spaces the Steam Deck and the Ally both chugged. The Ally probably chugs a little bit more on 1080p, but you can adjust the settings and get smooth 60 on both both handhelds and both games. Now I also tested Diablo 4 on both devices before the patch 1.1, so this is a bit older footage, but Diablo 4 runs like a charm on both devices, especially if you turn on not DLSS, FSR, there we go. Especially if you turn on FSR on both devices, it's super smooth, super responsive. It looks great on the Steam Deck, and on the Ally, even on, you can play on 1080p with FSR at like 90-60 FPS, so you can see the gameplay for yourself here, but since it's not apples to apples, like, take it with a grain of salt. But both handhelds play Diablo 4 really well, and I played a lot of Diablo on these handhelds, and I have no complaints whatsoever. I also tried a little bit of like random games, so No Man's Sky, it ran pretty much the same. Like, what I noticed is that the ROG Ally has similar performance to the Steam Deck, but at 1080p. So at 720p you can't squeeze out more performance. On 1080p it's like hit or miss. It's either really similar to Steam Deck's 720p performance, or it's a little bit higher. But overall, both consoles played No Man's Sky pretty great. A few dips here and there, but these games can't tax them enough. So in conclusion, I would say both the devices are really capable and their performances are really great. I really like the ROG Ally. It's just like the Steam Deck, except if you want a 1080p panel or a 720p higher FPS. I really do enjoy playing in turbo mode, even though it's a little bit louder and has its own issues and probably fried my SD card reader slot. But I like the extra performance. But the Steam Deck is no slouch, and it can run pretty much any game you throw at it at like half the price of the ROG Ally. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like and comment down your takeaways from this video. Maybe it sucked, maybe you hate something. Maybe my Steam Deck is underperforming compared to the SteamOS version Steam Deck, or maybe my ROG Ally is underperforming because its SD card slot is fried currently. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.